I hold in my hand a deep frame, but it's not complete. If I put 10 of these frames, just like this, into a deep box, there's no reason to believe the bees are going to build the comb within this frame. They need something to coerce them to build the comb exactly where I want them to build the comb, and that is where foundation comes in. Just as the name implies, foundation provides the foundation for the combs that the bees are going to build. There are a few different types of foundations here before me. I'll describe them each, and after I'm done, I'll show you how to put those foundations into frames. Historically, foundation was made of pure beeswax. So I have before me here a sheet of wax foundation. It's pure beeswax. If you look very closely at this beeswax foundation, it's imprinted with the shapes of hexagons on it. Also, a close look will show you that there are wires that are running vertically or up and down in this foundation. That's because when the bees construct comb on this foundation, even though that foundation is supported by a frame, if you were to turn the frame horizontally, the weight of the honey in that comb could cause the foundation to rip out of the frame. So those wires reinforce this foundation and therefore the comb in the frame. But wiring foundation into frames can be a very time-consuming process. So a lot of commercial beekeepers have migrated away from using pure beeswax foundation to using a more modern style of foundation, and that would be the hard plastic foundation. You can see the hard plastic foundation provides a rigid but somewhat flexible surface for the bees to construct their comb. If you look closely, it also has the imprints of hexagons. And one of the things that the manufacturers will do is they will coat the surface of this foundation with a very thin layer of beeswax to coerce the bees into using it in the first place. The beauty of using this type of foundation is that it's incredibly easy to install on the frame. You don't have to add wires, and it provides amazing strength and long life to the comb. This particular foundation type comes in multiple colors. You can see the cream color I started with, but also white and black are common colors. And beekeeping manufacturers have gotten so ingenious that you can purchase entire frames that are plastic, that are molded with the plastic foundation right in the frame. In this case, the frame is already built, the foundation's already in it because it's a single molded piece. It's ready to go straight into the hive. So there's not really much to tell you about this frame, but instead I need to show you how to put both of these foundation types into your frame so that you can use them in the hive. The first type of foundation that I'm going to teach you how to insert into a frame is the crimped wired beeswax foundation. So this is pure beeswax with some wires running through it. And of course I have the foundation here. You're also going to need the assembled frame. But what I'm showing here are parts of a frame because it's important to understand you have to use a very specific type of frame to accommodate crimp wired beeswax foundation. First, you'll notice on the end bars that you've got to have the end bars that have the holes in them. I'll show you why momentarily. You also need a wedged top bar to go with your frame, which is simply a top bar from which you can remove the wedge cleat. Now I'm showing you that I've already done it on this top bar, but I want to tell you that with the actual top bar, this piece of wood, this wedge, remains fixed to this top bar, and you will need a hive tool to pry that wedge off. The important thing to know both about the top bar and the wedge, once you pry them off from one another, is that there will be a little bit of ridge of wood remaining on the wedge as well as on the frame. So I like to use my hive tool to smooth that little ridge down as well as here on the top bar of the frame, which I have already done for this top bar in this wedge. The third part of the frame that you're going to need to remember, and it's somewhat unique to using beeswax foundation, is the bottom bar. Now you would think to yourself, maybe bottom bars really aren't that significant when it comes to different sheets of foundation. Well, that's not true. Sometimes beekeeping manufacturers will mill their beeswax foundation deeper than what you'll see with plastic foundation, so you need a grooved bottom bar that is especially deep. So what I have here is a bottom bar that is grooved quite deep and a bottom bar that is grooved to more conventional plastic foundation. And if I take these bottom bars and hold them up for you to see, you'll notice the one that accommodates the beeswax foundation has a much deeper groove than the one that accommodates just the plastic foundation. So just to reiterate, you need the wedge top bar, the deep grooved bottom bar, and then side or end bars that have the holes. One last piece of information about the bottom bar. They do make split bottom bars, like what you see on this frame here. And that split is made to accommodate beeswax foundation. When looking through equipment manufacturer supply catalogs recently, I noticed it's a little bit more difficult to find the split bottom bar, so you just want to be certain that you are using the bottom bars that actually came in the package with the wedge top bar. So beyond the parts of the frame and the foundation, you'll need safety goggles, you'll need a tack hammer, you'll need an eyelet punch and 4 eyelets, and you will need 3/4 inch nails. Now I'm going to put on my safety goggles and to show you how to put this beeswax foundation into an already assembled frame that is a wedged frame. Here we have a completely assembled wedge top bar frame, but I wanted to show you here again on the sides, the end bars, that it has holes that accommodates these eyelets. And the way that you insert the eyelets is you'll notice the eyelet punch has a significantly reduced end. The eyelets thread onto that eyelet punch. Then you put the eyelet punch over the holes in which you want to insert the eyelet, and you tack those eyelet punches into the end bar. The reason that we're inserting eyelets into these holes on the end bar of the frame is that once we put this foundation into the frame, we're going to have to include horizontal wires through this frame so that we can ensure the integrity of this beeswax foundation. Those wires are going to be pulled tight, and if you didn't have this eyelet, the wire would cut into the wood and therefore loosen the wire. I like to put an eyelet on the topmost hole and the bottommost hole on the outside of the end bars of the frame. So you'll see that I've done that here already. As I pivot this frame around, you'll notice that it already includes an eyelet at the top, an eyelet at the bottom, and as I spin the frame, the same thing over here. Now I have my fully assembled frame that includes the removed and smoothed wedge, as well as the top bar that is smoothed, the end bars that contain the eyelets, and the bottom bar that contains the deep groove. So with everything in place, I can now insert the foundation into the frame. The first step in doing this is noticing that pure beeswax foundation that has these crimped wires in them is smooth on the bottom end, but has wires that project on the top end. They go up the face of the foundation and then come out at 90-degree angles toward me. Well, it's those wires and this wedge that are going to affix this foundation into this frame. So the first step is to stand the frame somewhat upright and put the bottom of the foundation into the groove on the bottom bar, which I've done here. Now I'm going to tip the frame down, and you'll see that the foundation has gone down below the top bar. That's not where I want it to be. So I'm going to use my hands to position it where the wires are up against the roof of that top bar. With the wires in the correct place, I can take the wedge and place it over the top of those wires, which secures the foundation into the frame. And now I turn my frame upright and must put at least 3 nails, 1, 2, and 3, into this frame through the wedge into the top bar of the frame. And I will do that with 3/4 inch nails and my tack hammer. So typically what I do is reach behind the frame, pinch the wedge cleat towards the foundation, and then I can hammer nails into that wedge cleat. And I'll do one here, and one here. If your nails are too long, they will project through the top of the top bar and make it where their points are sticking out, which will make this frame difficult to work in the future. But if you've done everything well, now this wedge is holding in this foundation, and the next step is to wire this foundation into the frame. Remember, if this comb were constructed and absolutely full of honey, and you lift the frame like this, with this beeswax foundation, it's very possible for the comb to just pull out of the frame. So it does take horizontally oriented wires that you must add to this frame to ensure the integrity of the comb. That's in addition to the vertically oriented wires that are already in this frame. Now I'm going to show you how to wire this foundation into this frame. Remember, it's technically already captured in this frame. We put that wedge in there to hold those hooks that come from the foundation. But as I shared, it's important to run wires horizontally through this frame to increase the integrity of that comb. So to do that, you're going to need the frame with the foundation already installed. You're going to need a tack hammer and 3/4 inch nails. I love these frame wiring jigs that you can purchase from equipment supply catalogs that gives you a place to have your spool of wire, as well as different reference points, whether you're using a deep, a medium, or a shallow frame. And you need a spur wire embedder. The first step to putting wire in this foundation is to make sure the foundation and the frame itself go on this pre-made jig that holds it. All right, like so. So remember, we've got these 3 different sizes, medium, shallow, and deep frames. This happens to be a deep frame, so it'll go over all of the grid. Secondly, the pattern that I'm going to run this through is an X. I'm going to run it from this hole to this hole, turn the corner, and from this hole to this hole. So that means that I am going to tie off the wire both here and here. I like to put a small tack on the face of the end bar, right near where I'm going to insert the wire, as well as very close to where I'm going to tie off the wire. Next, you take the wire, you thread it through the first hole, through that eyelet that you inserted in the end bar. The beauty of this system is it keeps this roll of wire nice and tight as you thread it through the eyelet that's on the diagonal corner of that frame. So you see that here. I've created the first line of the X. Now I pull excess wire. Ensure that once I thread it, it's going to go the distance that I want it to go. And I insert it next through this eyelet that's at the top of the frame. So now I'm going to pull the wire through this eyelet at the bottom of this side of the frame. Now you'll notice there's a lot of excess wire, so I don't wrap a lot of wire around this nail. I do just a little bit, like so. So now this wire is attached to this nail. I might wrap it just a little bit further. The next step is to tack in that nail and carry its wire into the face of this frame. Now, essentially, you need to put tension on this wire, and you do that by reversing the spool. And you might need to help it a little bit, and you see that I have done that now here. The next step will be to detach the wire from the spool, wrap it around the nail, and tap that nail in as well. So what I will do at this point is use a wire snip and cut the wire. I always pull a little bit of extra wire back out of the spool and fold it back so that it's not tempted to lose where it's supposed to be. I then take this wire and pull it to the best of my ability and wrap it around the nail. You might cut off any excess wire. And then you tack this nail into the face of the frame as you did before. Now, one of the things that people really get concerned about when wiring foundation in the frame is the tension on this wire. There are a few options to deal with this. I could have taken this wire and twisted it with some needle nose pliers, or I could have pulled it tighter here on the spool. I've seen beekeepers put clamps on the frames as they wire that pulls the side walls of the frame in. Then they run the wire and release that clamp so those end bars of the frames go back out, which pulls that wire tight. But I'm going to rely on the beauty of the spur embedder to do two things. Number one, push that wire into the wax. But also the fact that it's spurred, so it crimps that wire as I push it through, which tightens the wire while it's embedding it into the wax. I'm not going to push that wire into the wax on this particular contraption. You'll notice if I do that, my spur embedder is going to push through the wax everywhere there's an empty space. So a lot of beekeepers, me included, like to have a piece of wood that is roughly the size of the inside of the frame so that you can sit your foundation onto it and so that you have a surface to push. I found a piece of wood left over in the shop that does somewhat accommodate the inside surface of this frame. I'll put the frame down like you see here. You'll notice the frame is still levitating on this half, so if I crimp this wire over here, I might push out the foundation. So essentially what I do is I crimp it where I have surface contact and flip the frame and crimp it on the other side. It's okay to be rough. The bees will fix it. So you just take your spur embedder and push it firmly down that wire like you see here. It's okay to do it multiple times if it doesn't stick. And then I'll do this corner here to ensure that I've got that wire crimped. I flip the frame and now do it the other way around. And now my wire is embedded firmly in the frame, and my frame has the structural support needed to hold the comb and the honey that the bees make. It took a lot of time to do this. And that's why a lot of beekeepers do not prefer to use pure beeswax foundation any longer, because of just all the steps. You've got to have the wedge cleat, you've got to put these extra nails in, you've got to run the wires, you've got to crimp that wire, and it can be somewhat aggravating. But if you do it right, this is old school beekeeping at its finest. This beautiful comb for the bees ready to use. In addition to having spur embedders, which I showed you how to use, pushing the wire into the wax, you could also have an electric embedder so that when you touch the wires and attach it to a power source according to the manufacturer's instructions and push the trigger down, it sends electricity through the wire, which melts the wax somewhat and embeds it that way. But frankly, this thing works just as well, and you don't have to worry as much about wiring it. There is one additional contraption that I wanted to show you. A lot of beekeepers today don't like to use whole sheets of beeswax foundation. Instead, all they want to do is put a little strip of beeswax foundation at the top, which will allow the bees to continue to build that comb on their own. If you're going to do that, you've got to affix the pure beeswax foundation to the top bar of the frame, and the best way to do that is using this archaic tool that not many people know what it is. This is a wax tube fastener. It's hollow on the end, and when you stick it into molten wax, there's a little thumb hole right there that when you cover that hole and pull it out of wax, You can slowly release a bead of molten wax down the inside surface of the top bar of the frame, and then you can take your little sheet of foundation and affix it to there and hold it in place while the wax cools, and that is how you will give them a starter strip of foundation. But that's really for specialist beekeeping. I much prefer to use foundation that is either wired into the frame or the next sheet of foundation that's even easier to insert into a frame. Good gracious at the amount of time it took to build that frame that accommodates the beeswax foundation, to take off that wedge, to clean the wedge, to put in the eyelets, to insert it, and then wire it. You're about to see why beekeepers, especially commercial beekeepers, have moved away from using pure beeswax foundation and instead prefer this plastic foundation. When you have an assembled frame, inserting a sheet of plastic foundation is quite simple. All you do is turn the frame such that the top bar is on the surface of the table. You insert your sheet of foundation into the groove in that top bar, like what you see here. Then you push the foundation such that it just pops into the bottom bar. This foundation is now secure in the groove top bar, in the groove bottom bar. It does not need wires, so you can use end bars that do not have holes. This is as sturdy as it comes. No wiring necessary. This frame is ready to go straight into a beehive. Think about how quickly I just inserted this foundation into this frame, making it ready to go, which is why this is the foundation and frame choice of many beekeepers in the US and around the world. Following these steps, you've installed your foundation into your frame. Your frame is sturdy, it's ready to use and ready to be put in a beehive, and now the bees will be able to build their comb on it. If you do it right, you'll be able to use it for many years to come.